Morning, Tri-Cities. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, and it's time for Coffee with Karl. I'm Karl Dye from Tridec, and today our guest that I'd like to now introduce is Abbey Cameron. She's the Executive Director of Three Rivers Community Foundation. Good morning, Abbey.
Good morning, Karl.
Thanks for joining us. We've been looking forward to having you on for a long time and learning more about the Three Rivers Community Foundation, or 3RCF, I guess, if that's the official designation.
If you say it a few times, it becomes very
It starts to roll off the. I might, transpose some of the letters and numbers for a few times, but I'll give it my best shot.
Thank you.
You bet. Well, let's kick us off with our tradition of talking about our mugs, and I'll start us off. I this morning am drinking out of a Tri-Cities airport, flytricities.com. Our friends at the airport and Port Pasco do a great job at the airport, and obviously it's a huge community asset that earlier this year I was able to go with Buck Taft, the airport director, on the inaugural flight for Avelo Airlines that opened up service direct to Burbank, which was awesome. Like we just ended up going to in and out and then coming back, but it was really cool because it was a brand new airline. It was one of their first flights, and did a great job and do a great job at the airport. So I'm happy to be drinking out of the Tri-Cities airport mug this morning.
Awesome. Yeah, my in-laws came to visit over Memorial Day, first time since the pandemic, and for them to come see my son, their grandson, they were so excited. But they hadn't been to visit since the renovation at the airport, and they totally they went all the way down the new concourse and couldn't find the baggage area because it was also new and wonderful. So
exactly. Well, that's awesome. How old's your son?
He's 8.5.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Super fun.
That's cool. How about your mug? Do you have a mug or coffee story for us?
So I'm here representing our tea drinkers today. I've got an Earl Grey going on, and this is a mug I got on a trip to Barcelona in 2017. So I'm feeling the wanting to travel again at some point.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, let's jump right into it. Abbey, you already told us how old your son was, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe like how'd you get to the Tri-Cities? Are you native or what's the Abbey story?
Sure. So I've been in Tri-Cities about 10 years now, since 2011. My husband and I were in Washington, D.C., and he was working somewhere else, but worked with a few folks at Battelle, and they were interested in bringing him out. So we got scooped up by Battelle, basically. And came out here for that. And it was an awesome transition. I think it was just the two of us. We hadn't started a family yet. We were living in DC in the city, and that was super fun. But we were kind of ready for a different phase of life. And so coming out here with the beautiful landscape and the sunshine, and we just appreciated all of that immediately. It actually made it a really easy transition, even though it was so different. And I've always worked in nonprofits. Just kind of always been important to me. And so I kind of always look for opportunities to give back and be a part of the community, and had the awesome opportunity to do this, and came to Three Rivers Community Foundation in December of 2019, just a few months before the COVID thing.
Yeah, well, I started at Tridec just a few months after you started at 3RCF, so I'm with you. In the nonprofit world, obviously the first step is getting out, meeting with your board members, and it's a lot easier to do it over a cup of coffee or face to face than trying to make a connection with Zoom. I mean, there's technology's great stuff, but I think everybody's looking forward to getting back to more face-to-face stuff as we open back up.
Absolutely. Sure. I made it a priority. So I got a lot of meetings in December and January and February. But certainly, after we all went home and got over the shock of things, tried to have some Zoom coffee chats and things like that. We're all awkward and we just make it work. So, but it is really nice to be at a point to start to move on from that. And I've been to some of the chamber luncheons recently, and everybody's so happy. There's a great vibe to be together.
There's no doubt. Well, how about How about the Three Rivers Community Foundation? How does it work? And we talked a little bit before, and I'm a little bit familiar with community foundations. Coming from Idaho, I worked with the Novi Foundation, formerly Inland Northwest Community Foundation up there. But I think generally how a community foundation works versus, maybe your more traditional 501c3 nonprofit works. Can you tell us maybe a little bit of history and background about Three Rivers? And then, how does a community foundation differ from, any other nonprofit that's out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Three Rivers has been around since 1999, actually, which maybe people don't realize we've been around for so long. And it was a group of an all volunteer group that started the effort. They wanted to create this community foundation is a mechanism for really long-term, even perpetual support for your community. So they understood the value of that and the strength that could bring to our area. And that kind of kicked it off. And then some pretty cool things have happened since then, and maybe I'll come back to that. So, we are a collection of funds. We are about pooling donors together to increase the impact. We do that through an endowment. So we pull together many different funds and invest them. And then the goal is that the proceeds of the investment go back out to the community, but in a way that the investment still has room to grow. So hopefully that foundational dollar is always there, and it's always rising, and then a portion of the proceeds go out, typically through our grant program, to support nonprofits. So we are a 501c3. We offer the same tax benefits as a 501c3. It's just that in, a typical nonprofit may support their clients and that are their mission or their service, and our clients are nonprofits. That's who we're here to strengthen and support, and working with a wide variety of donors to be able to do that.
Oh, that's awesome. That do you like your endowment? How is that invested, or like, do you guys do that investment in-house, or do you work with some larger foundations or someone, or how's that money? How do you accumulate interest and growth of that endowment?
Yeah, great question. We're a pretty small operation, so it's important that we have the right people and the experts to support us, especially in something as important as those dollars. So we have, our board is ultimately responsible for the dollars. We have a finance committee that oversees that more actively. And our endowment, which is right around $7 million right now, is professionally invested. We're with HFG Trust, and we have a great partnership with them to, they communicate with us regularly and help us manage the endowment, help us with more complicated giving if we're receiving stocks or something a little bit more complicated. They're able to support us through that. And yeah, we have independent oversight from our board and our committee and the professional services to make sure that the money is steady and will be there forever.
Oh, that's great. How about the nonprofits that you make grants to? Are there some specific categories in the community that you guys try to direct grant funding forward, or is it kind of a come one, come all, or how do you do that grant making process?
I mean, it happens in a couple of different ways. And it always starts with the donor. So if someone comes to us and they're interested in starting a fund, either now or as part of their legacy and their estate planning, the donor really gets to, it's a conversation, and it's an individual relationship that we're building with that donor. And they either know exactly what organizations they want to support, and that's very cut and dry for the donor, or they really care about animals, or they really care about the arts, and they ask us to help identify organizations each year to support in their area of interest. Or, because there's always a lot of options, they know that, you know, we do an application-based grant program every year, and if any dollars we have that are unrestricted, we can use in that grant program, and our board does the work of reviewing applications, making funding decisions, and using those unrestricted dollars for whatever the most pressing needs might be in our community. So it's flexible, it's supportive to what the donor wants, and ultimately it can be forever, because if you're starting an endowed fund, that's going to continue during and beyond your lifetime, and Three Rivers is set up to do that during and beyond my lifetime. You know, we're the structure here so that giving can always happen.
Yeah. About COVID, I know we just talked about, like, since you started December 2019, it had a short window before COVID kicked in, but how's that affected your processes that you guys go through, both on you know, establishing endowed funds and trusts, but then also on the giving side? Have you had to, completely overused term, but pivot, as you know, a lot of people talk about during COVID, or how's that affected you guys, or you know, what have you done to, you know, still be effective?
Certainly, kind of the fund development work trickled down a little bit. You know, people were definitely, a lot of people put on pause making those decisions, and you know, meeting with their estate planners, or their attorneys, and so we weren't doing as much of that work. But that gave us time to do two things, and one is we took the opportunity to kind of do some housekeeping. We, if you've paid a little bit of attention to Three Rivers Foundation, we tweaked our name, we developed a new logo, we launched a new website, and we have been working on implementing new administrative software. So we were really busy with just some, like, behind the scenes things. So that really filled a lot of my time at home in my office. And then really the big headline was we launched a COVID response fund. It's certainly a lot of what we do is kind of slow and steady, and we know that the dollars are there, and we can, you know, put out our call for applications and do our grants. We knew that we could do something to help our nonprofits respond to COVID, but we didn't necessarily have a lot of dollars that we could just pivot to that. So it was a little bit of a different mode for us, and we didn't know what the response was going to be to raise money, to give money. That's really not exactly how we typically align things, but we knew that we should try. So we launched the COVID fund in April of 2020, and it just, wow, we were just blown away by the response. It was tricky because we were raising money and wanting to get grants out the door as quickly as possible. So it was a very rolling, adaptive process, which is also a little bit different. We aren't always in that kind of super flexible mode, but we made it work, and got some just tremendous support. Everything from, you know, small individual $50 to $100 donations to a larger foundation gave us $20,000. Battelle gave us tremendous support with a $40,000 gift.
Oh, wow.
And because of how that came in, we were able to match that $40,000 gift.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like lightning striking. It was really great. So we distributed all, and we didn't take any fees on any of those gifts, the small ones, the large ones, not any of it. It was just part of our service to, we knew, I mean, talk about pivoting. All of our nonprofits were either unable to fundraise and at serious risk, or seeing a demand and a change in the need for their services and having to figure that out. And that takes dollars. And so we were able to hopefully get quite a bit back out to our nonprofits to support them. So all told, we gave out about $275,000 through that fund, used and distributed. And nonprofits could apply more than once, because we did this over, let's see, April, it was about 13 months the fund was open. And even in that time, the needs could change from a nonprofit. A quick story that really kind of stood out to me was Meals on Wheels. So not only did they have to close their cafe, and they pivoted to more frozen meals that their clients could heat at home. And I think they were on a different delivery schedule, so there was less contact. Their volunteers, a lot of them were at high risk and couldn't come in and do their volunteer work. And I would never have thought of this, but they realized that if they had a COVID exposure at their kitchen where they're making food, they would have to close for a period of time and clean and make sure everybody was safe before they started back up. Sure. And if they have a pause in operations, that could mean there's no food for people who are relying on it. So they, in addition to all of that, were prepping meals ahead so that they had a back stock and wouldn't be caught in that situation of not having food to hand out. And so that's the kind of and it was all, what I heard from nonprofits throughout the community was not stress and was not freaking out, but just a lot of resilience and creativity. And we've never had to deliver things to people's homes before, but by gosh, now we're going to deliver things to people's homes and leave it on the doorstep. And if that's what it takes, that's what we're going to do. So just kudos, just across the board.
That's a great story. And I think that, in doing these Coffee with Karls, the things that I really appreciate about our community is exactly what you're talking, the nonprofit response to COVID. We've got this long history as a community in doing that same thing, and overcoming challenges that are out there for the community together. And those are great examples and great stories. Is your work with the nonprofit community, and being a potential funder for them and your grant program. Are you seeing trends in the nonprofit? Obviously, huge impacts. You just gave a couple of examples of how it might affect their fundraising and then their operations and actually, fulfilling their mission. But then I know that there have been some federal programs through COVID relief where nonprofits could actually apply for forgivable loans or grant programs. Mm-hmm. Any sense of, how are nonprofits doing? Are they making it? As any other stories about challenges that they're facing out there?
I think in, there's always individual stories that I may not know, but I think by and large, there's been a lot of resilience. I think, things like the PPP loans and other grants being available to nonprofits, and the shuttered venue grants and things like that for more of our arts-based groups. Those were great opportunities. I think by and large, there's been a lot of resilience. One thing I will say is a project we just finished was we received a large pot of money from the Greater Columbia Accountable Community of Health. And it's a little bit of a chain. So that organization received the money, and they asked the Benton and Franklin Community Health Alliance to select an entity to help get these dollars out to the community, and to decide what the focus would be and what social determinants of health could be addressed with this money. And so we were selected to do that granting, and we were given the focus of housing insecurity, food insecurity, and access to behavioral health services. And we received about $415,000 to grant out, which makes it our largest pot of money this year. It's a great opportunity. So we just finished that process, and what our board, who reviewed all of those applications and interviewed all the organizations who applied, what we really heard is COVID has only exacerbated an existing issue in our community around access to mental health services and having enough mental health service providers in all sorts of ways. We do have several nonprofits in the community that provide mental health services. And then of course you have your traditional medical, through your doctor or insurance referrals, mental health services, but that we already had a deficit in number of providers based on our population before COVID. And certainly we've all struggled. I mean, all the things that I've told you during COVID that I got to do with being a part of 3RCF were really good for my mental health, because I was home and unsure about what was happening, and they're closing schools. I didn't know they could do that. And like, now my kids at home, and just so much unbalance. But being able to do that work and those grants really helped me personally. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, that you bring up a great point, because just access to mental health services in general is an issue, but then a crisis situation that we're in, like COVID, increases people's need for that access, just in general.
Yeah.
But like you say, it probably just exponentially makes the problem even worse.
And the wait, when you're not feeling right, you need help, and you finally get yourself together to make a call and try and get an appointment, and you have to wait 30, 60, 90 days, when maybe what you need is a prescription, or maybe you need some counseling appointments. And yeah, it's a real struggle. And so my board is very aware, because we just went through that process and heard a lot of those stories. And I mean, I don't know certainly don't have a solution at my fingertips, but we want to find a way to be a part of a solution if we can. So who knows? On the horizon.
Well, and that's, I think, for us in economic development, having a community that is, really healthy, has access to services, all these things that many nonprofits in our community are focused on, that you guys are a key funder for and a key connector, is really part of what we're trying to do when we're trying to help businesses grow, help people start up businesses, have economic vitality, health, and diversity, and then bring companies in. Everybody wants to know that we've got the right things in our community to make it such a great place to live. Like you said before, that it is, but there's always areas that we can do more in. And I just wanted to highlight that as the connection, and why it's important that we have this conversation and help talk about some of these things, so we can work together as a community to get you guys more help if possible, and being able to do those things. We are part of the International Economic Development Council, so it's a nationwide economic development organization, and they have 2 or 3 or 4 conferences a year. Well, this year their spring conference was going to be in Spokane live in June. Because of COVID, they had to go virtual, but so we turned in and watched the conferences, and they, as part of their working regionally focus of these conferences, they had Shelley O'Quinn from Innovia Foundation in Spokane talking about some of the programs very similar to obviously what you guys are doing at Three Rivers on COVID relief, and then some of these other things, and how your community, how your economy are totally interrelated, and how some people might think like, well, that's just charitable giving, that's just a foundation. Well, it's not just anything, it's part of our community. It's really important for us all to be aware of it, and then help out as we can. So
the dollars that come into us are charitable, but when we give it out in grants, that's helping a nonprofit keep their doors open, expand their doors. Sometimes we're funding a specific project or a program where it's adding a staff person. Those are jobs, and that's part of our economic health as well, is those continuing and growing.
Yeah, definitely. How about on you talked a little bit about like your donors, and sometimes they'll come and say, we want to set up an endowed fund for a specific cause or something, but how do you guys do that awareness work? Like how do people in the community, folks that might be interested in doing some long-term giving or or learning more about the foundation, do they just call you, Abbey, or how do you do that, or how do you get the word out on the giving side?
I mean, any way we can, we're happy to,
Yeah.
this opportunity. And if you have a Rotary Club or a Kiwanis Club, if you haven't seen me yet, hit me up. We love to spread the word. We've got active and passionate board members who help spread the word. We connect with our kind of professional services community, CPAs, investment managers, estate planners, folks who do that work, and connect with people who might want to plan some of that charitable giving in their legacy. When we work with individual donors, it's at the same time, it's rather simple, but also very personal and very relational. And we have some conversations and spend some time together and make sure we really understand the donor's intentions, make sure they understand how their fund is going to work and what the capabilities of it are, and ultimately where they want it to go. If you establish a fund with us, if it's either unrestricted or if it's that area of interest, kind of what type of support you want to do, but maybe not which organizations, those dollars typically get funneled into our annual grant program, which I should talk a little bit about.
Yeah.
But if you know exactly what organization you want to support, or a handful of organizations, then it's designated. It's locked in. And once you sign that agreement, and the agreement includes the 1, 2, 3 organizations that you want to support, that's the marching orders, and that's what's going to happen. At the same time, if a year or two down the road you change your mind, you want to add an organization, you want to take one out, you want to send some of your dollars to our unrestricted funds, easy as pie. Let us know. Let's update the paperwork. Whatever the current paperwork we have on file is what your legacy with us is going to be. So my colleague Roseanne and I are here to just have those conversations. And I will say sometimes we get notified that we were in someone's estate plan and we didn't know, which is a wonderful surprise. And our estate planning professionals, they do a great job of making sure we have the information that we need so we can fulfill that donor's wishes. But we would love to know. We can plan better, and we can kind of organize things a little bit better if we know. So just kind of putting that out there in the universe.
That's a great point. I think I would imagine that having that relationship before maybe a transfer happens, or like an estate, is being going on to that next phase, helps you guys learn more about that donor, learn a little bit more about their wishes, and then tell stories, right? I think that's probably, and I haven't had a chance to, look at your website and stuff yet. I'm sure you guys do a great job of it, but just telling stories about how somebody was one of the donors that established a fund was a Tri-Citian, and kind of telling their story and what they were interested in and how they did this. Because I think that's, if somebody's considering making an endowed, setting up an endowment with Three Rivers, it probably helps them to hear those stories, right? And just understand like how it works and who's that person. And it probably gives them a little bit, even greater feeling about the foundation and how you work, and just knowing those stories, right? That's stories always, I love stories. It always helps all of us relate. Yeah,
it's very relational, and that's how we work. And there's a few other ways that you can do that, depending on what your wishes are. We also do a lot of scholarship program work. So your endowed fund could be to support a scholarship, and that could be as an individual, you want to do an endowed fund scholarship, or as an organization or a business, you want to offer a scholarship opportunity to your employees or to your employees' families. So there's different ways to do that, and we have some tools and resources to help with everything from the scholarship application to the selection process. And another, I think, really important service that a community foundation can provide is being another way of being supportive to the nonprofit community is helping nonprofits start their own endowment at Three Rivers. So the same way an individual can set up a fund, a nonprofit can set up an endowed fund where they are both the contributor to the fund and the recipient of the fund, and we are just the investment mechanism.
Sure.
The same way you might consider a local investment firm, as a nonprofit, you could also consider Three Rivers and be the beneficiary of that fund in perpetuity. So
Yeah.
service, and because it's a service, we charge nonprofits a lower fee on managing their endowed fund. It's just mostly a service that we provide.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's things like that, or if a specific nonprofit had a large donation that came in,
We want to use
I
that
would imagine.
moment.
Yeah, and it makes it more sustainable, right? So they're not maybe kind of living year to year on their fundraising efforts and stuff. That they know that base is going to be there, and then it's a big help for them. You just talked about. Oh, go ahead.
Are all really everything that we do is Benton and Franklin County focused.
Yeah.
With any dollars that we are deciding how they get distributed, that unrestricted dollars, things like that. But if an individual donor, has a fund and some of their giving is local, but of course people also have other places they want to give, whether it's a National Heart Association or things like that. We can also, we do all of that as well, but always making sure there's a local Benton and Franklin County focus.
You bet. I was going to ask about the corporate giving. You talked about the matching donation that you just received recently from Battelle, and that kind of completed your fund drive. And of course, we all really appreciate the investment that Battelle, as the corporate partner, makes for all of our community, let alone the employment that they provide through their work at Pacific Northwest National Lab. But do you have other corporate partners? And I'm being here in Washington, I'm always interested in the big foundation in the state, the Gates Foundation, and I know that they do give grants to nonprofits and to community foundations to help in specific interest areas that they do. Do you work with Gates or any other large corporate foundation kind of donors on specific programs?
We have in our history. We received a Gates Foundation donation for capacity building when we added a staff person a handful of years ago. And in our COVID fund, we were supported by the Group Health Foundation, which is a new, rather large funder. And I know they're making a big investment in the Tri-Cities community and opened an office here, which is wonderful. So we are positioned to get that support and it's being that channel. We're a mechanism, we're a channel, and because of our structure and our grant making structure and experience, entities like that know that we can get it where it needs to be.
Yeah, well, and also knowing the community itself, right? Like the relationships that you're talking about, both on the donor side, but then on the nonprofit side, they don't know the Tri-Cities community. You obviously do, and that's, like you say, that's another reason they might want to work on specific programs that align with their interest areas, I would imagine.
Exactly. Yeah.
How about, and you mentioned before, so let's go back to it. Your grant making program, like with your unrestricted funds, and you even talked about, I think you said a software update. I don't know if you updated the software on the grant making process or not, but can you tell us a little bit more about that? And on nonprofits that might not be aware of Three Rivers, and how does that grant making process work?
Absolutely. So prior to COVID, Three Rivers would do one grant cycle a year. That was our annual grant cycle. That was when all the dollars went out. I joined the organization, and then we're doing rolling COVID grants and annual. It's just the grant making is kind of blown up. But yes, we made an investment in software. The board had actually made that decision shortly before they hired me, and then I got to implement it, which was a little bit of a neat trick. It was a lot of work like, here's this new software. But it's really brought a lot of efficiency and a lot of tools at our fingertips in how we can manage data, how our board can review grant applications. It's all much more streamlined. And so we're really grateful for that. I'll talk mostly about the annual grant process because that's what happens in normal life. So that application will actually open at the end of July. So it's available on our website. We post it on our social channels, and we'll do an e-blast to our nonprofit list. If you aren't on our nonprofit email list and you want to be, please send me an email. And so we have, that is usually open for 6 or 8 weeks, depending on what our timeline looks like. And that is those unrestricted dollars I've been talking about. It's a very broad grant application process. You have to be a 501c3 and you have to be providing services to people in Benton and Franklin counties. And mostly we really look to support organizations that are in Benton and Franklin counties, not just providing services. Sometimes we do kind of expand that thought a little bit, but keeping those dollars really local is, continues that economic benefit that we want to make sure is provided. We are actually currently in a process to think a little bit about how our board goes through the process of reviewing applications because the volume is increasing. We have 40, 50, more than 50 applications come in, and we want to make sure that we're have a process that is respectful of our board members' time, but still, gets us to really good decisions and lets nonprofits know that we really are paying attention and we're interested in what they're trying to do, and we want to support as many people as possible. But the game is we always have more requests than we have funding for. It's challenging. You really are thinking, is partial funding going to help this organization? Is that going to be worth it? Or if they don't get full funding, is it not going to happen? If we do this funding, are they going to be able to continue the program that they're wanting to do? Because we're only offering this one-time funding, and it's not guaranteed to continue. We really spend a lot of time on it, and so the board, it's a big undertaking of the board to review all those, make the decisions. We kind of come together at the end, and the board makes the decisions together. So we're kind of thinking if there's ways we can be a little bit more sophisticated in how we handle 50 or 60 applications that might come in and still make the best decisions that we can.
Yeah, like I say, from personal experience, serving on some grant committees in different nonprofits that do grant making, there's so many different ways to do it, and it's always so hard, right? Because I think just again, my own experience, it's very interesting, especially with the 501c3s, the charitable organizations, because we all generally know in any community how a nonprofit starts, right? Like there's a group of people, concerned citizens, become aware of this issue, and they get together and go, we should do something about this. We should raise some money. We should put it together. And a lot of times, it's interesting that the people that end up being your board members or the people that write that grant application might be really, really passionate about this cause. And actually, the need is huge. But when you're reviewing 50 or 60 grant applications, it's pretty hard not to just look at it and go like, well, this isn't written very well, or maybe get a little too critical on just seeing the paper and stuff. So it's a tough process to balance those things out, because a lot of times the organizations that need the funding the most, the issue that's maybe the most critical, for the community and the population served, might not be really good at like writing that grant and stuff. And so it's just tough to
That
kind
is
of balance those things out. I'm sure that's, I mean, I think everybody struggles with it, but yeah.
And if you don't pay attention to that, you risk not funding something that's maybe young or new, but really deserving of support.
Yeah.
We've made some steps to try and address that. We, especially during COVID, but even during our annual grant cycle, we try to keep the application really simple and clear, so that we're getting the information that we need to make a decision. The software gives us access to check 501c3 status. You don't need to track down that paperwork and send it into us. If your 990 is publicly posted, we can access that, and you don't need to upload a huge document. And so we do try and simplify, because it's critical. It's absolutely critical. It's an even playing field. And that worthiness is what comes through, and not spell check or sometimes cash comes through really well despite spell check with or without.
Well, and I think with COVID especially, maybe in normal times you'd have a chance to go out and do a site visit, right? Like if they have a building, go maybe meet with a couple of their board of directors. I mean, that I always found that you learn so much more about an organization, or get a better feel for, like, are they sustainable? Some of these big questions that you really are concerned about. I mean, you always want to have organizations that are going to be able to make it, kind of, because it's tough running a nonprofit in a lot of situations. But those site visits are just, on the ground and seeing people, talking to them, I think gives you sometimes it helps with that application, and, like say, kind of balance out understanding the organization, and how should you prioritize the grant giving. And I think especially like for your board members, where I'm sure that they're all making investments in the endowment as well, but in your position in your organization, you're kind of like, your donors have trusted you guys to have this really good process, especially for those unrestricted funds where they want to do that. And so it's always good to try to balance out all those needs, and just come up with, realizing you can't fund everybody, but prioritizing where the dollars are going to do the most good, for sure.
And I will say, I make the grant making process sound onerous, but the board, it's their favorite part of the year. I mean, reading every application and scoring them and going through the process, and when we can, getting to interview or site visit. The board, they're very positive about it. They're not griping. I don't want them to start, because it's only going to get, we're growing, we're giving out more and more money every year. It's only going to increase. So
yeah, totally.
Actually, there's another really interesting fund I should mention. In 2019, as part of the changeover in Trios Hospital, when they went from nonprofit to for-profit with the sale, their foundation spun off, and for a short period of time spun off as its own foundation called the Family Health and Wellness Foundation. But they found, after not too long a period of time, it was a little challenging, and we're looking for another way to. So they had a significant amount of dollars. They had about $2.2 million, and they selected Three Rivers to establish their fund in 2019. So that brought in $2.2 million. With their very specific and very well thought out instructions about those gifts. And there are 8 or 10, there's a handful of organizations that receive a really significant gift of just over $21,000 every year for 10 years as part of that fund. And they were notified of that, and they know those dollars are coming, and so they can really plan. And we use our grant process to know what project they're funding with that, and so it's vetted, and we know that it's where it's going. And then there's another piece of it that's really interesting, called the Gartner Fund, GARTNER. And that's a child medical assistance fund. This is a very different sort of thing from what we usually do. But it is a pot of money to support a child or a family with financial issues, where the child needs medical treatment. It could be anything from a surgery to glasses to equipment to accommodate a challenge or a disability. And we have funds that we can distribute directly to the medical service provider on behalf of that family, so that can be solved. So that's a little bit of a turn from what we usually do, but a great opportunity and a fund that we're happy. And I'm always looking for opportunities to share that, because it's
so for the Gartner Fund, would healthcare providers that like are aware of a family situation, would they help the family become aware of that, or would families apply directly, or how does that?
Actually, we look for the healthcare provider to apply, but it does request information from the family as well, and kind of if they're struggling with insurance coverage and some details like that. So pretty unique.
That's really cool, and I appreciate the Family Health and Wellness Foundation, because I think that's something that I learned over the years is a great role for a community foundation, is that when you aggregate these different funds, it's like a business case, right? Like essentially you're becoming more efficient in the administration of those funds and all the work that you do. You don't have to replicate all the overhead, like in that situation, if they had their own foundation, they were doing the same things that you guys could do, maybe under a contractor or, and so it's just more efficient. It's more of those dollars to use, right?
That's where it becomes an advantage for nonprofits who might want to start an endowment, or if a family is interested in starting a family foundation. Think about if you could achieve the same goals with starting a fund at a community foundation. A lot of paperwork and organization to starting a family foundation. And if you're looking to provide dollars, receive a charitable benefit, and distribute those dollars out in the community, I mean, there's a mechanism for that. And the power of our endowment as it continues to grow is it should be, the level of service we're able to get for the size of our endowment compared to what if you're kind of standing on your own as a nonprofit or an individual or a family foundation. We're, it's sizable. And so the impact and the services that we can get, and, I think our fees are pretty low to provide that, and all of your dollars stay local. We are locally staffed. Our board is all local, and our impact is all local. So it's all right here.
Yeah, that makes such a huge difference, I think. And I think the other comment I was going to make was, the demographics of our country, and there's different studies out there and different numbers that I think that we've all seen, but the amount of wealth transfer that's coming up like the next 20 to 30 years, right? Because as that generational transfer of wealth goes to the next generation and stuff, I think there's a huge opportunity for families especially to take a look at maybe an endowed fund or work with community foundation, Three Rivers, to be able to set up that specific giving, because as you go through that process, to be able to leverage all what you guys are bringing to bear, get a bigger return on their investment, if you will, for the community in these giving areas is a huge opportunity. And I'm sure that many families, again, because of the demographics, are going through that and having that conversation. So just wanted to, give a shout out to you guys to consider doing that. And I think, like you said, where your board and the relationships that you have with many financial advisors and professional community and stuff, obviously they're folks that are probably working with foundations, with families as they make that wealth transfer planning, and then can be able to become aware of Three Rivers, and then if they're interested, set some up, which is great for you guys and great for the community.
You got a little choppy on me there. I'm not sure.
How about, let's go back to the highlight, any more work that you're doing, or can you tell us any more on, the work coming up with that, and maybe some ways, organizations organizations could.
I'm not sure if that's my connection or yours. I lost you there, but I think you asked me to hit some highlights.
Yep. Sorry about that. Looks like Carl's having a little bit of a technical difficulty right now. So yeah, let's go over some highlights.
Yes, so we talked a lot about funds and fund development. We do look to that so that you can have your impact. There he is, back live.
Sorry.
But it's a very, like I said, it's a very flexible relational process. So if you want to start a fund with a smaller amount of dollars and grow that, we're really here for that. It can be a process and an evolution, especially if you're kind of calculating what years you want to receive your charitable impact and planning that with your CPA. But typically when a fund reaches $25,000 is when we would start making distributions from it, if it is in the endowment and invested. But we certainly also have a mechanism to accept smaller gifts. So if you donate on our website, there's options either to donate directly to an existing fund that you may have a connection to or that aligns with what cause you want to support, or of course to give to that unrestricted grant fund. So dollars that we collect since our grant process finished at the end of last year up until when we start the grant process this year, we pull that together and add it to what we can distribute. And that's a great way to maybe start getting familiar with us and start understanding what we do if you want to kind of see where the money goes and how those decisions are made. So those are great opportunities. And we can also help. I mean, end of the year gets to be a pretty busy time for us with people planning their tax giving. If you have that qualified minimum distribution from your 401k, and if you certainly there's lots of different ways to do that, but we do have some donors who, because they want to give that back out to multiple organizations, will do that through Three Rivers. So it's one donation to us, and then we make the donations to various organizations at their direction. Just kind of a simplification process for donors. And that's another way that some donors start working with us is doing that once a year, in and out. And then often, hopefully, that grows to starting a legacy and a fund that's going to continue.
Oh, that's great. Sorry for dropping off. I had a little bandwidth challenge there. It's this Zoom world that we're looking forward to coming back out of, but it happens once in a while. And Tracy, thanks for stepping in for sure. We're down to below 10 minutes. I wanted to go back to behavioral health just for a minute, Abby. And when I found myself talking to myself when I dropped off of the show, have you guys, and I know, like you said, this just came up through this latest grant making round, but any conversations or direction that you guys are talking about? Are there things that the community or other organizations could do to help and support you? Because I think that, no matter who you are, just dealing with COVID, so many people working remotely, having those challenges of, childcare and, basically working with your kids now and helping teach them because they're learning from home. Probably so many more, I think, just, mental health challenges throughout the community. So I think we're obviously seeing it. You guys are seeing it in the interest in the grant making and some of this data that you're coming up with. But any ideas or directions of where the community foundation may go with this, and any ideas about how the rest of us can help?
It's very early stages for us. It's not early stages for this being an issue in our community, but for it really flagging our attention, I would say. I do, in some early conversations, I think that there's some sense that one way to address it is through looking at the educational opportunities and the degrees that are available through our local schools, because if the right programs are available, you're more likely to funnel those graduates into positions in your community. There's some very complicated issues that I'm not able to speak about in terms of licensing and supervision as you're working up through mental health provider licensure issues. And we have heard that availability of qualified people to supervise early and kind of newer providers so that they can earn their hours is also an issue.
Okay.
I don't know what and how Three Rivers might be involved. I know that we might have some capacity to help, and if it makes sense, we might put the call out to the community to ask them to help us solve this issue, or help us be a funding mechanism to address the issue, which is the role that we would play. So that may come down the road. I know that some very smart people are thinking about it, and we're happy to be at the table and see where we can align.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of like almost how many hats or how many roles in the community that you guys play, right? Not just this aggregator of donors, not just this efficient funder to do charitable giving in directed ways for donors, or even this grant making agency, but then also kind of this community leadership role that Three Rivers Community Foundation plays for us to be able to highlight issues, and obviously, like I said, pretty early on, see which way it goes. But I think when you talk about Three Rivers Community Foundation role in the community, there's all those things that you guys are involved in, and then almost in a way being the hub of the community, which obviously community foundation, that's in your name, but are great examples of the work that you guys do. And just want to thank you and your board members and your donors for providing the service to our community, because it's really critical. And being a new Tri-City and the things that we can do to help, we're always open to those conversations and see where we can help and partner and maybe even spread the word, for sure.
Absolutely, that's what it takes. And this is an amazing community. There's just so many interesting facets to it, and a great history. And yeah, we're really happy to be a part of it. And we're focused on helping and growing so that we can really increase the support that we can provide.
That's perfect. I think it's always hard for me to time out, like, okay, we got about 3 minutes left, and I usually end up talking over the time. But Abbey, thank you so much for your time today and coming on. And I've learned a lot. And like I said, it's because of some of my experience, I was really interested in what you guys do, and any ways that we could help. But you did a really good job of talking about Three Rivers Community Foundation, what you guys do. And I'll just give you a little bit of time to maybe give us some closing remarks and any plugs you want to give, or open invitations to people that are thinking about making charitable contributions, or even making some investments in an endowment or donor directed funds or anything else. Give you some time to give another plug for that.
Yeah, I would say we recently released our new website. It's I think it's pretty good, but would encourage you to take a look there if you're kind of wondering about this starting an endowed fund thing. But if that, please contact us. Give us a call. We'd love to just meet and chat. It's all about finding out what you need and what your goals are, and if we align as a part of that, we're here for it. So there's just sometimes it can be jargony, and I don't want people to be turned off by like all this philanthropy jargon. For the nonprofit community, our grant cycle is going to open at the end of July, so that should hopefully be well known, and we'll work through giving out that batch of grants, which we don't know exactly how much funding that might be at this point, but I think in the range of $150,000 is probably what we'll be able to give away in the fall. Yeah, and we're growing, and check out our Facebook page. We definitely communicate there a lot. LinkedIn. We have a very new Instagram page. I missed Instagram a little bit. I just never really totally, so I'm figuring it out. But
oh, that's awesome. Well, Abbey, again, thanks for your time and thanks for your work in the community and to you and your board of directors and all your donors. Really make a difference in the Tri-Cities community in Benton and Franklin County. Thanks for your time this morning and joining us. And you know, anything we can do to help your work, we'll do our best to help spread the word and do anything that we can. So thanks for joining us this morning and have a great weekend. And thanks for everybody for tuning in to Coffee with Karl.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.